Right now, in showrooms across Australia, something is happening that dealers do not want you to see. Owners are driving their brand new SUVs back onto the lot, walking inside and asking for one thing: their money back. Not a discount, not a loaner car. A full refund on a vehicle some of them paid over $100,000 for. This isn't a handful of unlucky buyers venting online. It's a wave. And in 2026, it has grown large enough that dealer groups themselves are now telling government the system is broken. So what exactly is going wrong inside these vehicles? Which brands are at the center of it? And more importantly, what do you need to know before you sign for your next one? Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand a law that most Australians don't even know they're protected by, and it could save you tens of thousands of dollars. Let's start with why this is happening at all, because nobody planned for it to hit this hard, this fast. The modern SUV sitting in your driveway is not the same machine your parents drove. It's a rolling network of sensors, control modules, and software stacks, all talking to each other. And when that conversation breaks down, it doesn't always leave a mechanic anything to point to. A fault shows up on a Tuesday and vanishes by the time the car reaches a workshop. That alone would be a headache. But layer on top of it the reality of how these vehicles got built. Manufacturers, especially the newer entrants racing into the Australian market, have been pushing new platforms out the door faster than their quality processes can keep pace with. And buyers are the ones discovering the gap. The second half of this story is about knowledge, not machinery. Australians are finally learning what their consumer rights actually allow them to do. For years, a car with a recurring fault was just something you lived with because the dealer said so and nobody questioned it. That's changing. Owners are pulling out their phones, documenting faults, and using the words that actually matter under the law. And once you understand what those words unlock, the entire conversation with a dealership changes. So, who's generating the most heat right now? It's not one household name, it's a pattern spread across several brands that share the same fingerprints. New platforms rush to market, software layered on to compensate for hardware that isn't fully sorted, and dealer networks that frankly weren't ready for the complexity of what they're selling. Start with the brand carrying the most prestige, and right now, some of the most uncomfortable headlines. Land Rover's Defender, Discovery, and Range Rover lines have been hit with a recall covering more than 23,000 vehicles over a driver's airbag connector that can corrode and simply fail to fire in a crash. In the same year, a separate recall went out for Defenders, built with a third-row seatbelt anchorage bracket that wasn't welded to spec. These are not cosmetic issues. These are the kind of defects that, under Australian law, carry real weight when an owner decides they no longer trust the vehicle sitting in their garage. Then there's the newer wave of Chinese-built SUVs that have exploded in popularity on price and features and are now generating a very different kind of headline. Jaecoo, the newer arm of Chery, has had its own share of trouble. Its J7 was hit with 2 separate Australian recalls in 2026. One after the ECU wiring harness was found to chafe against the engine mounting bracket. The other after a wiring harness under the front seats was found to rub against a seat crossbeam bracket, both capable of causing a sudden loss of power or engine shutdown while driving. GAC's Aon has also drawn its share of online complaints, though nothing here rises to a documented, verifiable pattern the way the recalls do. GWM has had a rougher run than most. Its Tank 300 and Tank 500 hybrid SUVs, along with the Cannon Alpha Ute, were pulled into a recall covering over 1,400 vehicles across the affected model range after a wiring shield defect that could scramble communication between the engine and transmission control systems, the kind of fault that can genuinely strand a driver. The Haval H7 was recalled separately over head restraints that could detach in a serious collision. And then there are the cases that never make an official recall list at all, like the Haval H9 owner, who documented returning their vehicle to the dealership more than 21 times across 9 months for oil leaks, sensor faults, and engine problems, with the car spending more time on a hoist than on the road. Quick pause before we go further, because this next part is where the actual money-saving information lives. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because that's exactly the kind of thing we cover on this channel. Alright, let's keep going. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the real engine driving this entire wave: software. When Australian consumer law was written, lawmakers were picturing engines that seize and transmissions that fail. Physical things a mechanic can put on a bench and point to. Nobody was picturing a lane-keeping system that fights the driver on a straight road, or an infotainment stack that bricks itself overnight after an update nobody asked for. A software fault is intermittent. It's invisible. It clears itself before a technician ever lays eyes on it. The owner knows exactly what happened. The workshop finds nothing, and that gap between what the driver experienced and what the paperwork can prove is exactly where dealers have historically hidden. It's also exactly where owners are now starting to win, because dashcam footage, time-stamped phone recordings, and written fault logs are closing that gap fast. There's a pattern behind the pattern too, one that consumer advocates have started naming out loud. It goes like this. A manufacturer issues a recall. The dealer performs the fix. The owner drives away relieved. And then, weeks or months later, the exact same symptom returns, or a closely related one shows up in its place. Once you've been through that cycle, watched a recall notice arrive, taken time off work for the appointment, and then watched the fault come straight back, most owners are done. They stop asking for a repair and start asking for their money. And here's the detail. Manufacturers really don't want spreading. A recall notice is the manufacturer's own written admission that the vehicle left the factory with a fault serious enough to be a safety risk. For an owner building a case, that recall isn't a footnote. It's the strongest evidence they'll ever get handed to them for free. Walk into a dealership today and demand a refund, and you'll meet a playbook that's remarkably consistent no matter which badge is on the building. First comes the stall. The technician needs more time. Maybe there's a software update coming. Maybe they'll just hold the car another week. Then comes the goodwill offer, free services, an extended warranty, a credit toward accessories, all of it designed to end the conversation without ever escalating it to the manufacturer. And if the owner keeps pushing, the case gets referred up the chain, where it can sit for weeks, while the dealer network hopes the customer simply gives up. Some do. But a growing number aren't giving up anymore, and dealer groups themselves are now on record telling government that claims routinely take 6 to 8 weeks to resolve, and that when disputes reach a state tribunal, the wait can stretch up to 18 months. That's not a rumor. That's the industry's own reporting on itself. So let's get into the part that can genuinely save you money, because this is the piece most buyers have never been told in plain language. Every new car sold in Australia comes with automatic consumer guarantees. They exist regardless of what the sales contract says, regardless of the warranty booklet, regardless of how many free services a dealer dangles in front of you. The vehicle has to be of acceptable quality. It has to match what it was described as. It has to last a reasonable length of time without falling apart. When a car fails to meet that bar, the law splits the outcome into 2 lanes. A minor failure, the dealer gets to repair it, and you have to let them. But a major failure is different. That's a fault that would have stopped you buying the car if you'd known about it beforehand, one that makes the vehicle unsafe, or one that simply can't be fixed within a reasonable amount of time. And under a major failure, the choice belongs to you, not the dealer, not the manufacturer. You get to choose between a full refund and a replacement. If you're living through this right now, here's exactly what to do. Document every single fault the moment it happens. The date, the time, the odometer reading, what the car actually did. Report it to the dealer in writing every time, not verbally across a service counter where it simply disappears. That written trail, showing the fault happened, was reported, was supposedly fixed, and then came back, is the entire foundation of a major failure claim. If the dealership stalls, escalate formally to the manufacturer and get a complaint reference number in writing. And if that goes nowhere, every state has a consumer tribunal built exactly for this, low cost, and manufacturers tend to find their flexibility again remarkably quickly once a tribunal date is on the calendar. Step back from the individual stories for a second, because the bigger picture here matters for anyone about to sign for a new SUV, not just the owners already fighting one. This wave isn't bad luck. It's what happens when an entire industry spends years chasing new technology and market share faster than it can guarantee basic reliability. The warranty book in your glove box was written by the manufacturer, on the manufacturer's terms. The law protecting you was written by Parliament, and no dealership contract gets to override it. Before you sign anything, spend 45 seconds checking the Federal Recall Register for the exact model you're considering. A pattern of repeated recalls on one platform is telling you something the salesperson never will. So that's where things stand right now. And if you're sitting on a car that's been back to the dealer 3, 4, 5 times and it still isn't right, know that the law was written for exactly this moment, and it doesn't require a lawyer to start using it. Drop your own story in the comments. I read every one of them. And if this helped you understand your rights a little better, get it in front of somebody else who needs to hear it too.